Apologies for any inconvenience caused by these essential disruptions. The planet is undergoing its 6th mass extinction event. It's time to rebel.
My name is Hindu Umaru Ibrahim. I'm from Chad. I'm representing the Bororo pastoralists, who are the indigenous peoples of Chad. And when I come here in the COP24, and then people start talking about numbers, 1.5 degrees, and others say yes, some say no. I feel that so ridiculous to talk on the things they do not understand. Science tells them we have the window of 12 years to make change, and they is still denying. So the impact I'm seeing, how will be the survival of my peoples? We already lose a lot. Now, what are we going to lose? Our life, the extension of our culture. We make the first World War, we make the second. We have to take lesson, because the third is the environment one. But the third, it's much criminal than the first and second, because the third is thanks not only peoples, but all the environment. So that's what makes me sad, and that's what I feel when I talk about that.
I'm representing the 47 poorest countries in the world, the least developed countries group, and we represent nearly 1 billion people in these climate negotiations. 99% of climate-related deaths happen in the least developed countries, the research have found out, even though they contribute only 1% of global greenhouse gas emissions. We don't have much time left. It's not actually 12 years. For these poorest countries and communities, it's 12 minutes.
My name's Farhana Yamin. I'm here, officially on the delegation of the Marshall Islands. I've been in these negotiations since 1991. I've been to 22 of the last 24 COPs. And I'm very frustrated with how things are going, so I've joined the rebellion.
Here in Poland, we're building networks, we're making those links of solidarity. We're here to learn from each other, learn from other groups who are grassroots movements who are already taking action in different countries. And we're pushing the COP to have a more radical outcome. We've been very specific about the language we're using, about telling the truth, and we're also specific about the language that this is an emergency.
Climate change is a reality all over the world. It's been a reality for poor people in poor countries for some time now. It's actually now becoming a reality for rich people in rich countries as well. If you look at the wildfires that hit California recently and the hurricanes that hit the East Coast recently, causing quite a lot of death and damage. So we've passed the threshold of thinking about this as being something that will happen in the future. As of 2018, it's already happening, and we're going to have to move it from being an urgent issue to being an emergency.
Since I last addressed COP in 2009, nothing much seems to have changed. Perhaps now it's time to tell ourselves some hard truths. Carbon emission keeps rising and rising and rising, and all we seem to be doing is talking and talking and talking.
People are no longer waiting for some global consensus. They are suing their governments. They are suing the carbon major companies. They are blocking roads and bridges. They are organizing school strikes. And this is only the beginning. What I heard today is that this is the beginning of the emergency coalition here. So we're in. Thank you.
Well, I think it's time for people to get out in the streets, to do civil disobedience, and to show governments that it's time to take action. As the IPCC report made clear, We're facing a true planetary emergency. We're running out of time. I have been to all the COPs except one since 1995, and they have not made the progress we need.
We always support freedom of assembly, we always support freedom of expression, and when there are issues of concern, and especially issues that have such an impact on our livelihood and the future of the planet, we think everybody should rise up.
There are different streams of XR's work. One is to support Southern activists, which you'll hear about more tomorrow. Another strand is to support national offices being set up in many different countries. Another strand is to have actions taking place in the minority world, in the UK, for example, which our partners and allies in the South ask us to do. And another strand is the work that takes place at international meetings like the COP24 meeting. So I'm going to just ask now some of the people that you saw in the video about COP24, which took place in Poland, where Extinction Rebellion sent a team, to say a little bit about the work. I'm going to ask Kathy Jetnil-Kijiner, who's a Marshallese poet, performer and educator, and who was the woman who, with Ava, did the poem From One Island to Another.
Sister of ice and snow, I'm coming to you from the land of my ancestors, from atolls, sunken volcanoes, undersea descent of sleeping giants.
Sister of ocean and sand, I welcome you to the land of my ancestors, to the land where they sacrificed their lives to make mine possible, to the land of survivors.
I'm coming to you from the land my ancestors chose, Jetnil-Lijiner, Marshall Islands, a country more sea than land.
I welcome you to Jetnil-Lijiner, Greenland, the biggest island on earth.
With me I bring these shells that I picked from the shores of Bikini Atoll and Brunei Dome.
In my hand I hold these rocks, picked from the shores of Nuuk, the foundation of the land I call my home.
With these shells I bring with me a story of long ago. Two sisters frozen in time on the island of Buyai. One magically turned to stone. The other who chose that life to be rooted by her sister's side. To this day, the two sisters can be seen by the edge of the reef, a lesson in permanence.
With these rocks I bring a story told countless times, a story about Sesuma Amna, mother of the sea, who lives in a cave at the bottom of the ocean. This is a story about the guardian of the sea. She sees the greed in our hearts, the disrespect in our eyes. Every whale, every stream, every iceberg are her children. When we disrespect them, she gives us what we deserve, a lesson in respect. Do we deserve the melting ice, the hungry polar bears coming to our islands, or the colossal icebergs hitting these waters with rage? From one island to another,
I ask for solutions. From one island to another,
I ask for your problems.
Let me show you the tide, coming for us faster than we'd like to admit. Let me show you airports underwater, bulldozed reefs, blasted sands, and plans to build new atolls, forcing land from an ancient rising sea, forcing us to imagine turning ourselves to stone.
Can you see our glaciers grown with the weight of the world's heat? I wait for you, here on the land of my ancestors, heart heavy with a continuous thirst for solutions. As I watch this land change while the world remains silent.
Sister of ice and snow, I come to you now, in grief.
Mourning landscapes that are always forced to change. First, through wars inflicted on us.
Then through nuclear waste dumped in our waters,
on our ice.
And now,
this. Sister of ocean and sand, I offer you these rocks, the foundation of my home. May the same unshakable foundation connect us, make us stronger than these colonizing monsters that still to this day devour our lives. The very same beasts that now decide who should live,
who should die. Sister of ice and snow, I offer you these shells and the story of the two sisters as testament, as declaration that despite what we are told, we will not leave. We will choose stone. We will choose to be rooted to this reef forever. From these islands,
we ask for solutions.
From these islands,
we ask, we demand that the world see beyond
ACs, SUVs, their pre-packaged convenience, their oil-slick dreams.
Beyond the belief that tomorrow will never happen, that this is merely an inconvenient truth.
Let me bring my home to yours.
Let's watch as Miami, New York, Shanghai, Amsterdam, London, Rio de Janeiro, and Osaka try to breathe underwater. You think you have decades before your home falls beneath tides?
We have years, we have months before you sacrifice us again, before you watch from your TV screens and computer screens to see if we will still be breathing while you do nothing.
My sister, I offer you these rocks as a reminder that our lives matter more than their power. That life in all form demands the same respect we all give to money.
That these issues will affect each and every one of us. None of us is immune.
And that each and every one of us has to decide if we will rise.
So Kathy's going to go first because she's about to board a plane back to Hawaii, going on to Australia where she's performing. So Kathy, just like you to introduce yourself and maybe say a few words about where you are and your work and a little bit about the Marshall Islands. Thank you.
Okay, so my name is Kathy Jetnil-Lijiner. I'm a poet from the Marshall Islands, and I'm also done a lot of work, different types of work, and I'm an artist also. And most of my work has focused on climate change and raising awareness on the impact of climate change in the Marshall Islands. The Marshall Islands is only 2 meters above sea level. It's a completely flat island with no mountains. Some parts of the island are so thin you can stand in the middle of the road and feel the ocean spray on either side of you. And so we are extremely vulnerable to the impacts of the rising sea level. And so I use my poetry, which combined with videos, multimedia, installations, and performances as a means of raising awareness on how we are impacted by climate change. Poetry and art especially allows me to process the emotional weight of climate change as a Pacific Islander, as Indigenous women, as a Marshall Reef Atoll Islander who, stands to lose our country first. I also co-founded and I run a nonprofit based in the Marshall Islands called Jetnil, which is a nonprofit dedicated to Marshall Reef's youth to raise awareness on environmentalism and climate change. And we use media training and art training to empower our youth to be a part of the climate change conversation.
I just want to introduce Saleemul Huq, who's joined us from Bangladesh, and Achala Abeysinghe, who is based currently at the moment here, but is the advisor to the least developed countries. And just to show you a little bit of the flavor of what's going on here, you're on a giant screen speaking to hundreds of rebels who have gathered in Bristol for this weekend to prepare for a series of actions that will culminate in a week-long shutdown of London. Yeah. So I know that some of you saw the Bridges action in November, and you may have seen the actions taken by, for example, XR Scotland, Scotland to shut down the international dinner of the oil executives. There have been a number of arrests. Exile is also working closely with many other organizations, and yesterday did a solidarity action on Westminster Bridge. Saleem, can you speak?
Hi, everybody. My name is Saleemul Huq. I'm the director of the International Center for Climate Change and Development, based in Dhaka, Bangladesh, where I'm speaking from now. It's my pleasure to be here to talk to you. I'm sure no one in this audience needs to be told that Bangladesh is one of the most vulnerable countries to the impacts of climate change. About 160 million people living in less than 155,000 square kilometers, which makes it one of the most densely populated poor countries in the world. And the country happens to be on the delta of three of the major rivers of the world, the Ganges, the Brahmaputra, and the Meghna, which makes it particularly susceptible to flooding, and in particular from climate change, sea level rise, increasing salinity in the coastal zone of the country. So the country is extremely vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. However, we've known that for quite some time now, well over 10 years. And over that last 10 years, we haven't been sitting idle. The country has been organizing itself, developing a climate change strategy and action plan, mobilizing resources to carry out actions from the national down to the local level. And everybody in the country now has probably one of the highest levels of awareness of the issue of climate change, including children in schools and universities, and are actively taking actions to prepare ourselves for the worst impacts of climate change. Our emissions of greenhouse gases are less than 0.5% of global emissions. So even though we're trying to do our best to reduce them, our emissions aren't what is causing the problem. However, we are going to suffer the consequences of the problem. And therefore, we are preparing ourselves to be able to tackle the impacts of climate change. If the global temperature remains within 1.5 degrees, I think we should be all right. If it goes up to 2 degrees, it will be much, much more difficult. If it goes beyond 2 degrees, then it will be almost impossible to save millions of people in my country. And hence, what you are doing to get global action to reduce emissions, to ensure that the global temperature does not rise above 2 degrees, preferably stays below 1.5 degrees, is extremely important for us. You need to be taking actions. We need to be getting the rest of the world, particularly the developed world, who have caused the problem and who are reluctant to take actions, even though they promised to do so. We need to have ambitious actions now, much, much more ambitious than anything that has been promised so far. The Paris Agreement is a good start, but we need to do a lot more. So we are with you in solidarity with your actions wherever you do them. We also do actions. Our kids came out in solidarity with the Kids Friday meeting. Although Bangladesh, Friday is a weekend, they didn't have to come out of the school, but they were out on the streets demonstrating along with the kids from all over the world. And we are in solidarity with the actions that you are taking. And finally, let me invite any of you who are interested in coming and seeing climate change firsthand. It's happening here as we speak, and engaging with the population that is trying to tackle it and deal with it. You are most welcome to come and spend some time here with us in Bangladesh and see what we're doing and join us as well.
Maybe, Achala, I can ask you to say a little bit about your work with the least developed countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Farhana. Hello, everyone. My name is Achala Abeysinghe. I'm the head of the Global Climate Law Policy and Governance team at International Institute for Environment and Development. I'm also the legal and strategic advisor to the chair of the Least Developed Countries group in the UN climate negotiations. The Least Developed Countries group are a group of 47 poorest countries in the world, including Bangladesh, including countries like Ethiopia, Eritrea, Gambia, Senegal, 33 countries from Africa, 14 countries of Asia and the Pacific.
And these are the countries that suffer the most from climate change impacts, even though their contributions to the climate change is very minimal. Less than 2% of global greenhouse gas emissions come from these countries, but more than 99% of global deaths of climate-related disasters come from these countries. And in these countries, we represent nearly 1 billion people. And as Saleem also mentioned, these are the countries that represent the poorest, millions and millions of people who are already displaced by climate disasters, who are losing their lives and livelihoods due to climate disasters. So I want to say a massive thank you to all of you who are fighting for climate justice and fairness. And I feel very proud to be part of this global movement and also represent these millions and billions of people who do not right now have a voice at the global center of climate decision-making process. And therefore, your actions are extremely important and very, very helpful for these countries and these millions of people and many communities to stay hopeful. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Achala. I don't know if you heard people applauding in the audience, and hearing from you, and you've been working with these countries who are absolutely on the front line, and they are facing devastating consequences today. So we'll come back to you, Achala, but I wanted to ask Kathy maybe to say a little bit about how the Marshallese people are looking at how others are talking about migration and displacement issues. I know that the president of the Marshall Islands recently spoke about this issue. How do you feel when people say, there's just a few 100,000 of you, why don't you move?
So basically, I know that my country's position has been that migration is not an option for us. We are standing our ground and we're not leaving our islands. And we've made that decision based primarily on the fact that our culture is deeply rooted on the land in the Marshall Islands. There's so many parts of our land that informs who we are as a people. It informs our culture, it informs stories, proverbs, legends, chants. Every single piece of land is a part of who we are. And so we refuse to migrate. And right now, we've been, they have given us some advice. Climate scientists came to the Marshall Islands and told us that we have to start planning seriously for adaptation. And what he meant by adaptation was elevation in artificial islands. So his position was, we agree that you shouldn't have to move, you shouldn't have to leave. But if you want to stay in your island, you're going to have to start planning for elevating the islands or building completely new islands, because that's how dire the situation is, and that's how dire the projections are in terms of how climate change impacts our islands. And so for me, my position, speaking for myself, I know that it's horrifying to consider the fact that we would have to blast apart our reefs or build a completely new island. But that's where we are. That's how serious the consequences are. I'm still fighting, and I still think that there's an opportunity to turn things around. But I do think that we have to be practical too. We have to plan for the worst, and that's where we're at. And so I use a lot of that information, and I channel my grief and my anger that I feel about the situation into my art, into my poetry, and into my work.
Thank you. I think the poem that you did with Ava was very clearly a difficult and very powerful way of sharing both that sense of frustration and anger, but also the love and the beauty that you have with your land. So thank you for that. Thank you for that. Saleem, I just wanted to ask you about Bangladesh, how they are very aware of the daily impacts of climate change and how they're taking part in solutions to cope with some of the inevitable impacts.
Yes, absolutely. I think probably I would assert that the people of Bangladesh are probably the most aware people of climate change in terms of numbers. I said we have 160 million people here, and I would say the vast majority of them are aware of the phenomenon of climate change and are actually seeing it happen and observing its impacts and finding ways to tackle it. So I'll mention three ways in which we're doing that. I mentioned the government of Bangladesh has developed a climate change strategy and action plan, is trying to integrate and mainstream tackling climate change into all our activities as we go forward, from the national to the sectoral to the local level. The people of Bangladesh are doing the same. Farmers in the coastal area, for example, are growing salt-tolerant varieties of rice, which have been developed by our scientists, by our rice researchers, where the salinity levels have gone beyond the capability of even salt-tolerant varieties of rice to grow. They are switching from rice to crab growing or shrimp growing. So wherever possible, we are adapting to the circumstances as best we can, although it's always playing catch up with the rapidity at which climate is changing. And in the long run, we do know for a fact that millions of people living in the low-lying coastal areas will simply not be able to continue the livelihoods that they have. And so we are preparing for that by educating their children, their girls and their boys, capacitating them to be able to move and get jobs in towns, not Dhaka, because Dhaka is already the fastest growing megacity in the world and cannot absorb another 10 million migrants, which is the magnitude of potential migration due to climate change over the next 10, 20 years predicted. This is now almost certain to happen. So we are looking at a dozen towns around the country where we are making them into what we are calling climate resilient, migrant friendly towns, which can then absorb and provide economic sustenance to 500,000 to 1 million people, so that the next 10 million people that have to move, unfortunately they will have to move, can move with dignity and can move on their own volition. They're not forced to move. They are better off economically and are able to get well-paid jobs where they move to. That's the idea. It's a long way to go to implement it, but at least we're trying to think about doing that.
Thank you for sharing that. I think sometimes people in the UK and the richer countries think that nothing is going on, that, you know, these countries are sitting back as victims waiting for handouts. And I really know from the experience of Bangladesh that, in fact, a lot of proactive legislation, policy, education, and many, many solutions are being acted on to already cope with the devastating impact. And you have also, maybe you didn't mention, a new fund, which is several years old actually, on loss and damage, which is one of the pioneering legal instruments in the world. And I wondered if you could say a bit about that, because as we face the inevitability of damages all around the world, maybe Bangladesh can be our role model on how to cope with the devastation in a way that is kind and just to everyone.
Yes, absolutely. So I think that over the last year, since we had the publication of the IPCC's special report on 1.5 degrees, and we've had hurricanes like Hurricane Florence in the Atlantic and wildfires in California, we are seeing a tipping point being reached where we now have impacts of climate change all over the world, which are attributable in part, and that we can calculate how much they are, to the fact that we have already increased the global temperature by a degree globally, which in some places is more than a degree. And hence we are seeing the impacts of climate change and therefore need to deal with those. In the climate change jargon, we call that loss and damage, because it's beyond adaptation. It's when adaptation has failed or we can't adapt enough. And loss and damage is a reality. It's happening already all over the world, including in Bangladesh. And Bangladesh is trying to develop what we are calling a pilot national mechanism on loss and damage with our own money, with our own funds, to find out ways in which we can identify who are being affected and provide them with adequate compensation. This is the responsibility of any responsible government to protect its own citizens. And Bangladesh is trying to figure out how to do that in a reasonable manner, in a transparent manner, with its own money to start with. But hopefully in future, we might get resources from the rest of the world as a solidarity fund to support us. At the same time, we are very happy to share what we are doing both on the adaptation side, which I spoke about earlier, as well as on the loss and damage side with other countries who are going to have to face this. And unfortunately, even the rich countries in the UK and in Europe and in America are going to have to face the impacts of climate change, whether they like it or not. And they can come and learn from Bangladesh because we are learning how to tackle this problem. And in many, many cases, I'm sure the rich can learn from the poor in this case.
Absolutely. I think people need to understand that all over the world, developing country and the communities have tremendous wisdom and tremendous resistance, and they've been fighting capitalism, colonialism, extractive for many, many years, and they have many deep-rooted ways of fighting these injustices, and we can best support them by taking action here. So thank you for telling us that and reminding us there's a lot going on already. Achala, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to say a little bit about the IPCC's 1.5 report. You were a key part as an advisor to the least developed countries to fight for this report. And I wanted to ask you how the LDCs responded and what they're asking for next in response. Thank you.
Thank you, Farhana. The IPCC report, the key message for us, for our countries, is that actually the time has already run out. 12 years to save action for 1.5 degrees is not a long time. In the context of least developed countries, as I mentioned in the previous video, it's 12 minutes. Our people, our farmers have already started losing their livelihoods. Our fishermen have started committing suicide because the rivers have started to dry out. So the key message in the IPCC report is actually the time is running out. It's not an urgent issue anymore. It's an emergency. It's a crisis that we have to start taking action as soon as possible today. And in the UNFCCC negotiations, we struggle even to welcome such alarming, such insisting scientific report, but also to say that least developed countries are not waiting waiting for results to come from the rest of the world. They are the case of living testimonies in terms of how they are suffering from climate impacts, but they are also the cases of victims becoming heroes with so many actions going on the ground. And from the LDC group's perspective, at the group level, 47 countries level, they've already introduced number of very great initiatives, including training their own people through a consortium of their own universities, including introducing an initiative for renewable energy and energy efficiency, pushing for 100% energy access for their people, pushing for 100% renewable energy access by 2050, pushing for 100% energy efficiency by 2050. We are also introducing a new initiative for effective adaptation and resilience, particularly aiming for the UNSG summit in September on climate change. So these are the cases of hope. These are the cases of optimism. But what we expect from the rest of the world is actually solidarity as well as support for these countries through technology, through financial, through human resources to help these countries to stay optimistic and also take those urgent actions that are recommended by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change.
Thank you, Achala. Yeah, that lifts my spirit, and you've got a big round of applause. Yeah.
Thank you.
So you're being broadcast into the solution zone of the festival, and it was very nice that you again highlighted that far more action is going on in countries that have far fewer resources and should not be being asked to step up action. Yeah, so thank you for highlighting that. So Kathy, I just wanted to give you a chance to also say what's going on in the Marshall Islands. Are there plans to go renewable? Are you phasing out greenhouse gases? What's the Marshall Islands doing internationally? Thank you.
I think that the Marshall Islands, our government is actually doing a lot, and I'm pretty proud of the steps we've taken on in the international arena to really tackle climate change. And so some parts of that is we are committed to 100% renewable energy. I think it was by 2050, and then also sorry, it's kind of loud. But besides that, we're also part of the High Ambition Coalition. This was started by our former climate ambassador, Tony DeBroom, and we're leading in that regard. And then we're also a part of the Climate Vulnerable Fund, CBS, and so we're able to represent there as well. And so I think in a lot of ways, the Marshall Islands, despite the situation, despite how dire it is, I think that we're, taking steps internationally that are really savvy and that are, that are very bold. We're taking leadership, rather than waiting for others to tell us what to do, and rather than taking a really passive stance. It's just like the 350 climate warriors. We're not just drowning; we're actually fighting. Sorry for the.
Yeah, just to explain to some people who may have come in that Kathy's actually in Hawaii at the airport and is zooming in or flying to Australia to do a series of performances. So that's the airport announcement. And
sorry about that.
If you're from the Marshall Islands, there's practically no other way to get to the rest of the world other than to go through Hawaii and to fly. So thank you, Kathy, for doing that. So I wondered if you had any questions to put to Extinction Rebellion that I can answer for you about how Extinction Rebellion and maybe the new movements who are growing up around the world, like the students striking yesterday, how can we support you and your work? Saleem, you could go first.
Sure. So I think what you are doing is extremely relevant and useful in terms of raising the level of ambition, really. We've got lots and lots of promises, but they are just long-term promises, and very little gets done about them. And we really need to get leaders who have made these promises to deliver them much, much faster. And we've been sharing our thoughts and pleading for many, many years, and they don't listen to us. So you're going to have to make them listen by taking actions on the streets, closing down actions, and taking civil disobedience. And the young kids need to do it. The school children who are on strike need to get their parents and their uncles and their aunts and their grandparents to understand the existential threat that we are talking about globally. If not for us, they have to take action for their own children because they are not leaving behind a world that they would like the children to live in, and they have to take action. If they do that action, they will be saving both their own children and ours, but they don't really care about ours, but hopefully they'll care about theirs.
Thank you. Achala, I know you were with some of the striking students yesterday.
Thank you, Farhana. Yes, I had an opportunity to say I'm sorry to those students, those kids yesterday, because I feel like we have collectively failed them, the future generations. But also I told them thank you on behalf of those poorest people, communities, countries that we represent in this fight against climate change, because I think they are the hope that most of us do have. And as I said, again, thank you to everyone who is taking action. I think heaps of optimism, heaps of action in this part of the world do help. It's about justice and fairness for those people who do not have a voice. And your voice do matter, not only in this country, not only in this part of the world, but also there are a trickle-down effect. There is a massive amount of hope going from this part of the world, to the countries of Africa, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Gambia, Burundi, Bangladesh, Laos, Cambodia, Tuvalu, Marshall Islands, Solomon Islands. All these countries are watching you, and to say thank you is I think it's a great privilege on behalf of all those people that we represent. So thank you again.
Thank you, Achala. We applaud your work. It must be very hard to continue year after year. I know that the diplomats, the advisors, the activists, tops and the grassroots, and everything in between have been working really, really hard. And without all your work, we would be in the 4-degree, 6-degree world already. So I know sometimes we seem very far away from the carbon-free, capitalist-free, extractive industries-free world that we want. But actually we are making strides, and you are my climate heroes. You're my justice heroes. And it's a real honor to have shared this time with you. I just wanted to know if there was anything else which you feel that you want to share now that the mic and the tech is working fine. So please let us know. Kathy, maybe you can.
I think Achala really summed it up. I really appreciate, this, I don't hop on calls that often to talk on this sort of issue. And I think that this conversation, even though it's on an airport and through my phone and dealing with tech issues, it's given me hope, to be honest. Like hearing what Achala and Saleem has shared has actually helped me as well. And I think you are right. I think there is a lot being done, and it can get really easy to get caught up in the grief and the anger personally. But I just really appreciate that. And so, yeah, that's all I wanted to share. Thank you.
And Achala, if you'd like to say anything, will you be joining any of the Extinction Rebellion actions in April?
Yes, I hope so, Farhana. I must also say that I'm also a lawyer by training, so happy to park that side of my career and actually join the rebellion, because if our leaders do not listen to people, I don't know what else we can do. In those climate change negotiations, in the UN meetings, when the US and Saudi Arabia and other countries coming in and asking the least developed countries to compromise on words and on sentences, they are actually asking these countries to compromise on their lives and livelihoods. So we have failed in terms of our global decision-making processes to actually give real solutions to our people, to our countries. So the hope is now with people. Hope is with now those people who are in the room today, those people who were on the streets yesterday. So I definitely would like to join you and applaud you for what you are doing. So thank you. And please keep raising awareness on the flight and fight of our countries and our people in the societies, communities that we represent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Saleem, will you have us in your hearts? And what will you be doing on April the 15th?
So let me offer some final thoughts for you and your audience there. This is repeating a little bit of what has been said before, in that this is really ultimately, in my view, an issue of global injustice, a problem created by rich people, and I count myself amongst them, and rich countries, in which poor people, many in my country and many others around the world, are going to suffer the consequences of our consumption patterns and our carbon footprints, which is not right. It is wrong. And we need to all collectively rise against this. Those of you who are there, those of us who are here, is a common goal. And to me, this is, in a sense, there are many negative aspects of globalization, but this to me is the most positive aspect of globalization. This is a truly global problem that connects all of us, you over there and us over here, in tackling a global problem, and each of us providing solutions to that problem, we on our side, you on your side, but connecting ourselves to each other. And the actions that you took yesterday, the kids took yesterday, is something that really gives hope. I am now looking at the issue of climate change as an opportunity to solve many of the world's problems that we haven't been able to solve before. Poverty, energy use, extractive industries, many, many things that we can do to improve both our quality of life as well as the emissions of greenhouse gases. And I'm no longer negative. I am positive that this is an opportunity that we need to grasp. The only thing is we don't have much time. So we have to accelerate our ambition and get everybody on board as quickly as we can. So good luck.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, we'll do our best, and thank you today for bearing with all the technical difficulties. They worked in the end, a little bit maybe a metaphor for the run-up to April and the tasks ahead of us. I think working together, we will get there. I really do. Yeah. So thank you very much. I'm going to finish off here. I'm not going to try and summarize and say something inspiring, because you are doing work which is truly inspirational, which requires courage every day, and which requires huge amounts of strength to fulfill. That we've got your back. Don't worry. And we will be. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.